Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to 1% Better, where we take a look at hidden stories in sport. I'm Xylon, and I'm joined by Dr. David Lipman. This is the part where I have a medical question for him. And last week's medical question was, what bone in the foot bears the most impact force during running, up to 3 times the body weight? And that is the calcaneus. But you weren't so sure about that, and you asked listeners to get in touch with us if they have had
So that wasn't the question. The question was, what's the hardest bone in the body?
No, the question was, what bone in the foot bears the most impact force during running?
Oh, wait, no, you're
That was
right.
2 episodes ago that I asked the
Sorry,
hardest
you're
bone
right.
in the body. Good
Got
thing
it.
that you
Got it.
remember, though. Anyway, we asked listeners
Well,
if they've ever experienced this fracture before. We did hear from Claire Pedsall, who said, calcaneus fracture, wear a year. Go me. Long distance runner, it was because I had what's called a coalition in my right foot/ankle, which I've had since birth. It was undiagnosed, but could never cross my legs without pain and makes running quite stiff in that foot. Docs at the time, before diagnosis of coalition, thought I was a builder or dancer.
I'm not quite sure what she means by builder or dancer in that context. But listen, firstly, corrections corner, and thanks to Claire for sending that in. So the most common stress fractures in athletes is actually the metatarsals. So that's the long bones in the foot that make up like the majority of the foot. Sort of from the top, if you're looking at the top of your foot, it'll be from sort of just in front of your ankle down to like the ball of your foot, right? Those are those metatarsal bones. The equivalent to like the palm of your hand or these sort of bones in the back, but in the foot. The navicular are 14 to 35% of all stress fractures, and they're rare in non-athletes. As we sort of talked about last week, they're pretty common in athletes, 35% in athletic populations. That is 35% of all stress fractures would be navicular in athletic populations. Calcaneus stress fractures are the second most common in general, but they're the most common in military populations. So
Military
25% of
populations.
yeah. So most of this research is out of the military because in the military we have standard loading protocols. They all come to basic training and they all get given the same shoes, and then they go crack on and get all these fractures because they're not ready for it, and they're getting overloaded. So there's tons of this research is straight out of the military, which is great, but also challenging because it's a really different context. They're wearing military boots and doing all sorts of stuff. So 25% of all the stress fractures in military populations are calcaneus. And in general, with calcaneus stress fractures, 24% are bilateral. And the reason for that is because there's usually an underlying thing. Because it's such a hard bone, there's something underlying. We're going to get to another situation of another listener who reached out to us soon, and that'll explain some of that. But basically, yeah, that's kind of the prevalence of the different stress fractures. Tarsal coalitions, which is what Claire has, are interesting. So this is where two of the bones in the midfoot are joined and shouldn't be. They should have a joint, as we know them, right? So, and the joint is basically it has they're connected via ligaments, right? And so they can move, but you can end up with like a fibrous join between the bones rather than a ligament which goes over the top, which can stop that. And but that can also be bony or it could be cartilaginous. So there's three different types. So there's the fibrous coalition, which is a syndesmosis. There's a cartilaginous coalition, which is a synchondrosis, so that's cartilage, and then there's an osseous coalition, so synostosis, which is bone. But there's about 1 to 2% of people have a tarsal coalition. The most common is between the heel bone and the navicular, the calcaneal navicular. And basically, these can present a number of ways. You can have, and they often come up symptomatically. So Claire mentioned she always had pain in her foot. If you could perhaps if her mother had said, oh, listen, we need to take you to get this worked out when you're crossing your legs, why it's painful, and you do a bit of an assessment, you can sometimes get a bit of an insight depending on what type of coalition it is, because the more this is bony or cartilaginous and the less it's fibrous, the less give it has. Anyway, at that point you might do some investigations. You probably wouldn't end up x-raying them because you tend to not try and x-ray kids because it's radiation they don't need. But maybe an astute person picks it up at that point. The question then is, what do you do with it? It depends on the situation, and I'm not going to get into it. But it's just an interesting thing. I picked a couple of these up when I was a podiatrist. They can often present with a really flat foot, particularly if it's one-sided. You can also have recurrent ankle sprain, so it's a little bit different. But on to the other listener
Just
that I
quickly,
mentioned.
I
Yep.
want Claire to get in touch with us. Let us know what you mean by they thought I was a builder or a dancer. I'm very intrigued. You're going to have to rewrite us again, Claire. Let us know what's going on.
Yeah, it might be to do with the shape of the foot. I've got a feeling, given the Tarsal Coalition as well, is like they thought maybe she, if she hadn't said dancer, I would have said, okay, they thought she, because of her flat feet or something like that. But who knows? I'm not too sure. So let's hear from you, Claire. I'm super keen to hear as well. You can DM us on Instagram. You don't have to comment on Spotify, but you can also comment on Spotify as you did previously. But Joel Woodridge reached out. He reached out to me privately, and I checked with him if he was happy for me to share this, and he said he was. So he said, hey, David, just listening to the podcast, I had 3 stress fractures in my calcaneus, 2 on my right, 1 on my left. Remember, we said that they're often bilateral. So I don't think these are truly bilateral, because bilateral means at the same time, but certainly both sided, right? Um, and since 2023, I've been okay since then. I had an eating disorder and became obsessed with getting lean for triathlon performance. I was 167 kilos and 51.8 kilos on the DEXA scan, with my T score was negative 3.3 in the lumbar spine. That is 3 standard deviations below normal. And 1.6, negative 1.6 on my hip. Now I'm 167 centimeters and 64 kilos. So that is 13 kilos heavier, which is
Sure.
almost 25% of body weight at that weight. And my
Yep.
bone density is normal and a healthy range. And he's been, he mentioned he worked through the eating issues with his clinical psychologist and a sports dietitian. And he's pretty passionate about sharing that message. So what I'm getting at there is, when you have a fracture in a really hard bone, the question is always why, particularly if there's recurrent stress fractures. And it's often a indication of like, oh, what's going on here? Could there be an eating issue? The other, classic is recurrent stress fractures is always, why are we getting these, right? And that's men or women, right? And so then in women, it can be a little bit of an easier conversation, because you can ask questions like, have you lost your period? Because then you can start a conversation into red S and those sort of symptoms, syndromes. But not necessarily in men. It can be a little bit harder, but certainly important discussions to have nonetheless.
I'm really happy you're in a much better place, Joel. I appreciate that message. 167 centimeters tall. That is my previous height before spinal fusion. So 51
Are
kgs.
you
That is
are
light.
you are you taller or shorter now?
I'm taller, 2 centimeters taller, so I'll look down on Joel. Sorry about that. But yeah, that is that. I'm sorry you went through that, and I'm glad you're in a much better place. Thanks so much for getting in touch. If you'd like to get in touch with us, there are numerous ways you can do so. You can DM us on Instagram, 1% Better Pod. We've got an email address down in the show notes below, or you can rate us on Spotify and comment down below on Spotify. And I just want to ask, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet and you're listening to us now, please subscribe. It really, really helps us. We are supported by Precision Fuel and Hydration on this podcast. They have such cool athletes, and from time to time, they come on this podcast. So you rating us and you subscribing to the podcast really helps us. Geez, I can't keep up with them. The athletes seem to be all over the world. They just seem to be global at the moment.
Well, they are. They're very global, and certainly global in our world, right? But it was an interesting performance over the weekend. I caught an eye on one of their athletes, Izzy Bat Doyle. So she's an Olympian for Australia. She's a runner. She's run marathons, track 5 and 10Ks. But she ran the fastest ever half marathon by an Australian on Australian soil over the weekend in Launceston at the Launceston Half. She ran 68:46, which is lightning. Particularly
Wow.
given she came off Boston, so it was a Boston build. So it's good to see her. She had a pretty tough Boston. It's cool to see her bounce back from that and run so fast. So be interesting to see where she goes from here. I think I heard her say on another podcast that perhaps Valencia was an option, or something else maybe as well in there. So let's see where she heads. Keen to see her run a marathon, and see how she goes, because I think her best marathon is definitely well ahead of her. So keen to see her rip in again and go for it. But if you want to be like Izzy, or indeed like us to some degree, you can indeed use Precision products. We have a discount code for you. It is BETTER2026. That is better, all in capital letters. Or you can follow the links in the show notes to go to their fuel and hydration planner. That'll automatically apply the code for you there.
It's a 15% discount code on your first purchase. Buy, buy, buy. No, no, no. Um,
Cheers,
I
mate.
am what?
I just
Sometimes
bye
you got
bye
to do
bye
a
now. No,
hard
no,
sell, man.
no, no.
You got
I
to do a
love it.
hard
That's
sell.
why I was like chuckling. I love it.
I wanted to ask you, you and I had a discussion. You were asking me the other day how I was doing, and I said I'm really starting to feel good and I'm really starting to feel strong. And I feel like I'm out of the woods, like the inflammation at the site of my spinal fusion L5S1 has really gone down. I'm approaching 5 months post fusion, and I'm comfortably doing 30 minutes on the watt bike in the gym on the days that I don't have rehab. And I said, man, geez, the rate things are going, I reckon I could be a few weeks away from riding outside on the bike. So I obviously have travel picking up again. Got a big European trip coming up in a month's time or so. You said be cautious about just going from the watt bike to hopping outside on the road bike. Why is that?
Well, there's another variable in the middle there, which is what bike you want, right?
Mm,
So I said to you, I would switch some of that watt biking for some indoor trainer to then take that bike outside because the bike fit will be different and the positions you'll be in will be different. Right? We're talking about your back, which is fundamentally, if you think about it, just very coarsely, you're attached to the bike via a handful of things, basically feet and hands,
butt and
and
hands.
yeah, and button hands, and between that lies your back, and so there are forces across your back that'll transmit and sort of get transmitted from the bike through you in different ways. Now it's really important, and there'll be different strains. Now, just bike torso angle will be different on a road bike, different road bikes, or if you're in the drops or not. Right, that's why they exist, right? Or if you're in TT position, or if you're then on a watt bike in the gym. So all of that is a variable that has a significant impact on your back. So you have a home trainer and you have the bike you're going to ride outside on, like let's do some of that before we go outside. It makes the most sense to me. But the fact you're not uncomfortable on the watt bike is a good sign to me because your watt bike is probably less well fitted to you than your road bike is. Now, the road bike position may be more aggressive, which could be a different variable that is concerning. But let's see. I think you'll be better on your road bike, but the reason we get on it is because we have no idea. We can all guess as
Yeah.
much as we want, but you get on it and then you go outside. And then when you do start running outside, I'd say be very careful about where you ride and be very choosy and picky about it. So
Mm.
ride pretty good roads that are pretty flat where you're not going to have to where you're not too worried about traffic just as you get used to it, because you don't want to be making decisions, having to sprint, like get out of the way, move quickly, hit speed bumps, hit potholes, like all that stuff is going to potentially throw, not a spanner in the works, and it's not going to wreck anything, but it's like, well, these are variables we don't want to have to deal with initially as we're getting used to things. Once we're comfortable doing that and we've adapted to that, then we can add another crease and a wrinkle there.
No, it definitely has an impact. And geez, where I live, I might have to not go out if I need to avoid all those things you just said at the moment with the amount of rain we've had and how the roads are shaping up. But just quickly, yes, the touch points for a normal cyclist on a road bike are your feet, your butt, and your hands. And then if you are the Giro d'Italia winner, Jonas Vingegaard, you also have your lips attached to your handlebar. I'm not explaining that joke. If you know, you know, and let us know if you know what I'm talking about. I'm just he's okay. I'm just gonna call it out. He's obviously won a bunch of stages at the Giro d'Italia on the way to winning, and I'm gonna look like a real idiot now. And he's got a photo of his wife and kids on the handlebars, which he kisses every time he wins, and then kisses the ring. And there's just been doing the rounds on social media, people being like, once is fine, but every single time it becomes a little much because then he's also on the phone to them straight after winning and whatever. And kudos to him, he's very close to his family. But that was a Jonas Vingegaard joke. 4 touch points to the bike for him.
Got it. Makes sense. Yeah.
What's happening with your running? Did you ever run with Peter Tierney again?
Yeah, previous guest. So we met, did some. There's a patch here in like Wimbledon and Putney Commons that is beautiful to run in. Really nice on trail. It's great. There's lots of running in there. I used to link that with Richmond Park and do up 30Ks, 20 miles ish on trail without retracing my steps. So there's certainly some good stuff there. There's certainly some other podcast listeners I see cruise through there on the Strava group. So it's great. And we went in there and did a bit on Sunday. So I ended up doing. I met him, then ran home with him basically, or almost to his place, and then ran a bit extra. So I ended up doing another 21K. So tolerating it okay. Deciding whether to step up in terms of more distance, but we'll see. I head off to the mountains this weekend, so that'll be another wrinkle to test the Achilles and see how it goes with more dorsiflexion stress on it. So could be next week that I'm in a bit of pain, but maybe not. Who knows?
You're taking your stride power meters with you into the mountains. I must tell you, I almost lost my power meter today. Found the puppy, chewing on them, but zero damage. Those things are robust, man.
Where did you leave him?
On the floor, on my shoes, on the floor somewhere. Amateur
On the
mistake with a puppy around.
shoes or on the floor? Because
On the
those are not the
shoe.
same
No,
thing.
no, she took them off my laces from the shoes.
Mate, you got to be better than that. Puppies and shoes don't go well. Keep the
I
shoes away,
know.
especially the running shoes. But anyway, no, mate, I will indeed take my stride pods. Actually, I was doing a little packing before this, and specifically went and grabbed them, put them on the shoes I'm taking with me. I'm taking some road shoes in case I have to run indoors. And we'll be taking them to the mountains. It's actually quite interesting because I had this thought when I was doing it, is like, this will actually be really good for me to look at the, like, equating the sort of power there and dropping it a wee bit, given I'll be at a bit of altitude, because our place is at 1,000 meters, which is not a ton of altitude, but it's not nothing. So using power in addition to heart rate, in addition to all that, to see then how I'm doing intensity wise and what I can tolerate. And then certainly the same uphill, because again, uphill, I'm not sure if uphill will be better or worse for my Achilles. Now, the reason it could be better is that I'm not going to be running as much, right? So the intensity comes from more hiking. So you can say,
Mm.
well, there's less force through that, which is true, but there's also more tensile force in terms of the range of motion. So I'll be in more dorsiflexion, and I'm quite dorsiflexion sensitive. Dorsiflexion being, bringing your toes up towards your shin or your knee. And I'm quite dorsiflexion sensitive because there's a bit of a bursa issue there as well. So I'll be quite interested to see how I pull up from there. But I'm looking forward to using the stride data to really understand the sort of metabolic component of what's going on for me if I can go uphill, and how that goes for me. I've got a feeling I'll actually be okay going uphill, particularly if it's more steep. Because ironically, with more steep, you end up probably not using as much dorsiflexion because you end up on your toes. So there's a couple of really nasty grades right near me. Sort of, it's probably like a mile to 2Ks up. And then I can get, it's probably 2 to 3 minutes going as hard as I can uphill, up like a 35% gradient, which is quite nasty. And so you can get your heart rate right up without even running. So I'll do a bit of that. Obviously, using poles changes things significantly because you increase the metabolic cost of going uphill, but you save your legs. So yeah, we'll report back next week. Take my Stride pods and see how we go. But we do appreciate Stride on this podcast and their support of the podcast. So do check Stride out. They do make running power meters. You can use them on trail. You can use them on road. I was surprised. I just said to the guys, "How waterproof are these?" And they said, "Oh, like they're not. You know, I wouldn't be submerging them too far." And I was like, "Oh," I went through some sort of knee deep water at Lavaredo last year with my Stride pods without a concern. So. Yeah, obviously held up better than I thought they might. And I'm certainly not concerned about them getting wet. It's more about, like, do you submerge them?
Amazing. We do have a link in the show notes down below if you'd like to check out Stride, one of our partners on this podcast. Should we get through some community shout outs? The first
Yeah, for
one
sure.
being John Burchett Sharp. He ran 1:33 at the Great Manchester Run Half Marathon. Shout out to you, John. He's one of our biggest engaging listeners on this podcast. Also, Christian Trumpedach won the Ringstead Bilob Trail Half Marathon in 1:13. Man, we have some fast listeners. Jeepers.
Yeah, Christian is very quick. We also had Brett Goldfinch run the Mponga 19K in 1:22, and Michael Nidernitsky, previous guest, he ran 32:19 in the Launceston 10 kilometers. It's the same running festival that Isibat Doyle from Precision that we mentioned before ran, but he ran the 10K there. He won his age group. I think he came 40 something, but he won his age group. So it's the benefit of aging like a fine wine, Nidder. You get to win things. So congratulations. I know he doesn't. I don't think he loves winning his age group. I think he looks at himself overall, but nonetheless, shout out to Nida. And then of course Johanna Jechru. So she won so she didn't win. She ran Ironman 70.3 Krakow in Germany. She was 16th in her new speedy age group. So I think she's just aged up, similar to Nida, has just aged up. And there's certainly some age groups, particularly for women, particularly in triathlon, where when you age up into them, it actually gets harder. So in like the 20s age group, it's often easier than in like the 30s age group, given when people start the sport. So it's quite interesting there.
Yeah, 30 to 50. Very, very competitive. Also, shout out to pro athlete Jimmy Whelan, who went 28:26 for a PB in Great Manchester Run in the 10K. Jimmy is a previous guest on this podcast quite recently and one of our best performing episodes so far. So if you haven't checked that out yet, go and listen to that. I highly recommend it. Spotify poll. Do we have results from the last Spotify poll?
Yeah, so this is the one from a couple of weeks ago because I keep them open for 2 weeks because of people's listening habits. And so this was from the goat discussion about the running goat. And my question was, does Helen O'Beary deserve to be in the goat discussion? And everyone sort of agreed, 100% said that range and longevity should definitely matter. So she should be part of the conversation. So I'm glad that everyone is on the right side of history there. I agree. We also had some Spotify comments come in. And again, this is from that episode, the GOAT Formula One. This is from Greg. And he said, late to the comment section here, but I'm disappointed Leonidas of Rhodes didn't get a mention. An ancient Greek athlete who won 3-foot races in 4 consecutive Olympic Games, 180 meters, 400 meters, and a shorter race where athletes ran with a helmet and a shield. I
Wow.
just said that's unbelievable. I love that. I love that fun fact from him.
We also got a comment on Spotify from DJ AB at work. I think that's the Dr. Abelang, who said there was a Netflix documentary that looked at twins eating either a normal healthy diet or a vegan diet. My conclusion from that was to vary my veg as much as possible. And I think that feeds onto the point of varying the fiber types. Anyway, glad to hear you guys are on the mend. I'm 20 days from comrades, and unfortunately, no niggles like last year. I did the non-recommended Cape Town Marathon 3 weeks before. I'll just try and recover as best as possible and see what happens. You only live once. Good luck to you, AB, at Comrades Marathon.
That was with respect to the gut health episode from Emily Dow a couple of weeks ago. Again, performing very well. So do go check that one out if you haven't, and let Emily know. Certainly saw some people commenting on her Instagram about some of our stuff. So appreciate those people letting her know where they've started following her as a result, because that helps our podcast as well. So thanks to their team. Also on that episode, we had Nick Economides comment. He said, further to your point that everyone could do with eating more protein and fiber at breakfast, when I tried to distill the essence of what makes a healthy diet, I arrived at 3 base principles. And those are to eat around 2 grams per kilogram of body weight of protein, which is about a gram per pound, eat 40 to 50 grams of fiber daily, and restrict saturated fat as much as possible, under 10% total calories being the cutoff, but the closest to zero, the better. Would you say that's a fair assessment, or do you reckon anything important is missing? And I responded there on Spotify, and I just said, it depends a little on the individual and how you think about things. Generally, evidence supports a Mediterranean diet style that includes in athletes, for the record. But what you eat within that is compatible with his 3 points. So you can eat different types of Mediterranean diet, but you can certainly eat a Mediterranean diet that aligns with his points there. I'd also say there are ways and means to achieve your 3 in a relatively unhealthy ways, right? Protein bars, fiber supplements, etc., may not be as healthy as whole foods. But they are definitely 3 key points, and I agree with that. Perhaps the fourth is ensuring enough variety. And again, that sort of speaks to our previous comment as well there on getting enough variety of certainly different types of vegetables for lots of reasons, including fiber type as well as, or type of fiber, as well as polyphenols and micronutrients there.
At the moment, if you haven't checked them out yet, we're putting out bonus episodes every Tuesday, an energy series with Aitor Verbia. They're doing really, really well. Lungisa listened to the 3rd installment in that series, and he said, amazing episode, gents. This is just so fascinating, especially for someone who's a runner who loves longer races. Top tips here just to make us 1% better. Top tier, 15 out of 10. I don't think that's how maths and rating works, Lungisa, but we'll take it. We'll take 15 out of 10.
We will take it. We also had another corrections corner. So Sarah, and we really appreciate these for the record, guys. Remember, guys and girls, remember people. Remember, it's about getting it right, not being right. So this is from Sarah G. 109 on Spotify, and she said, sadly, the Tour de Honor announcement was largely spin. I did mention that I was probably good. There was probably a good amount of that. Greeted positively by people who read the headline, but not the details. She said, fair enough, but I think that's on us. And I'll put that on you, mate. You're our cycling correspondent here, not me. Their claim of equal stages is not really accurate when the women only race 3 of the 6 stages, a decrease in race days compared to the last few years, given their post-tour one-day race is now scrapped. So I did some research into this, and I think I prompted you to do so as well. So there's always been 6 stages for men and 3 stages for women. I couldn't find anything, because I don't know how to look for this, about the other stage, the post stage one-day race, but purely the tour as it exists, not the one stage, which probably I'm not going to debate whether Sarah's right or wrong. I think she's probably right here, but there's always been 6 stages. Now they're aligning the women to do the final 3 stages of the men's race on the same day on the same course, which I do think is positive. But yeah, the post-tour single-day race that's been potentially abolished, I have no idea about. Do you know anything about that, mate? Did you find anything about that?
Yes, I think Sarah is correct. So it looks like they're doing away with the one-day race that happens after the tour, and they didn't want to shine a spotlight on that, I'm guessing. So they
Of course
only,
not.
and I would
Why?
do the
Why
same.
would
I'm a
you do
PR person.
what?
I would do,
Yeah,
I would, I would frame it exactly the same. So what they did was make an announcement where this has never happened in cycling before, where the men race the same day, and as the women and the men race the same day, same course, same start line, same finish line. The men race 6 days, the women will race the last 3 days, and those will coexist next to each other. But they made that exciting announcement with omitting that the 1 day race that happens after this race falls away. So the women will only have 3 race days now, not 4 race days, basically. But thanks, Sarah,
yeah,
for sending that in. Really, really appreciate it.
yeah. And I'd
Um,
like to. I honestly think this. I agree with her that it is not all positive, but I do also. I would also like to see more of this because I think it actually reduces costs in significantly as well because you don't have to close roads as much, right?
Big
Certainly in
time.
Australia, closing roads is a nightmare. Maybe not in other parts of the world, but
And very
you know,
expensive.
yeah, so in that case, like the more we can do to make women's cycling cost less for organizers, the more likely they are to do more stages. The more race days they get, the more exposure they get, the better they'll get, hopefully, and certainly the more money that will flow in, hopefully. Both cost less, it does more. Now the challenge here is for teams. Now there are a few women's only teams and a few men's only teams, but the majority of teams are both, which is a good thing again, but that makes logistics and perhaps costs quite difficult for them, right? Because now you have double the logistics, and some people double up. I know certainly like Alpecin share coaches across the teams, which I think is great. There's probably people who share nutritionists as well. Now those people can't be in two places at once, so that does make it difficult. But I'm sure they can work it out.
Yeah, exactly. We've got an exciting announcement today. It is a brand new month. We are into June. And today we welcome a brand new sponsor to this podcast, Nomeo. Are you excited about that?
Very excited. Actually, caught up with the guys around the London Marathon, or one of them anyway. Had a coffee with him, had a bit of a chat about this, and just yeah, super excited with them jumping on board. And very appreciative, of course. It obviously helps us to spend money on the podcast. We aren't drawing any salary or any costs from this ourselves, but it helps us to upgrade, pay for software, etc. So it's super appreciated in that context. And then we're hoping to get some of their athletes and scientists on the podcast in a little while as well. But also just excited for the company and how it's growing and the plans that they have upcoming from a product standpoint. I got a little bit of a discussion there that I thought was quite cool as well.
So, talk to me about Nomeo. What is Nomeo and how would it be beneficial to me?
Well, I mean, to you at the moment, perhaps not, given you're not doing a lot of high intensity training. But basically, it's a broccoli. It's made from broccoli sprout extract. So people might be familiar with sulforaphane and broccoli sprout extract. This is something that's been very popular in the health fields for quite a while. It's much more new to the endurance and sporting fields. I actually wrote a newsletter article on this that you can read. That is linked in our show notes, all about this that I shared with the guys as well at Nomeo, and they were very appreciative of that. Prior to any, prior to any agreements between us. So I wrote that before. But in short, broccoli sprout extract that they combine with some lemon juice and some other things to make their shots that you take. So it's an isothiocyanate, which is a key part of phytochemical. It's a key phytochemical there. So it's made by the broccoli. And sulforaphane is one highly specific type of isothiocyanates. So isothiocyanates, also known as ITCs, you'll often hear, they're found in cruciferous vegetables being broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, etc., but most abundantly in broccoli sprouts. So interesting, like super interesting research here. It's something I was using in a health sphere well before Nomeo existed. For different reasons, we can get into a different time. But it's interesting. I think they've got an amazing team of athletes at the moment. They're sponsoring Andreas Helmgren, Cole Hocker, Mads Peterson, Casper Stornes, previous guests actually. So Phil Sessman, Petter Engdahl as well. And certainly saw a photo from Jimmy Whelan from his race with a bunch of NP Nomeo on the table there. So I don't think they sponsor Jimmy, but it's the sort of thing, and I allude to this in my newsletter, that there's not a lot of research on pure performance benefit at the moment. I take Nomeo, then get better. That isn't there. There's some mechanistic stuff between, but there's not that yet. Although the guys have told me there's certainly some interesting research coming out. But there's enough smoke for me to think that there's real fire there from talking to people who are not sponsored prior to, again, this agreement, and everyone saying, yeah, I think this is helping. So it's been quite interesting to observe that and how quickly it's taken off. So yeah.
I had a professional cyclist stay with me a while ago, and she was taking it. I was super intrigued. excuse me. And she couldn't speak highly enough about it. And since then, I've been very, very intrigued. So I'm so happy that they've joined us and super keen to check it out once I'm up and running again.
If you do want to check them out, please follow the link in our show notes because that does let them know you've come from us, and that's always very helpful to us. So thank you to all those who do follow them, and thank you to Nomia for sponsoring us.
Let's have a look at what's come across my desk on this week's episode. Some quick bits. Should we do some updates on some previous discussions and topics we've had on the podcast?
Yeah, I think it's helpful, partially for those who follow along every week, partially to signpost back to some stuff. So we talked about the NBA draft and some potential changes there to try and stop tanking. Tanking being intentionally losing so you get a better draft pick. And so the NBA Board of Governors has approved their new format. So we talked about that a few weeks back. So you can certainly go back and look at that. You can always check show notes and see what we talked about, specific time chapters. So I go through those and do them. So you can certainly go back and look for specific conversations there and click through to them. Also, following last week's discussion of teams that need to win because it's good for the sport, we talked about the Knicks. So last week's episode is not performing well, candidly, folks. Go back and listen to that. It does sound like it's got no endurance sport in it. We know you're all endurance fans, but there is a lot of endurance sport in there. We just didn't name it appropriately. So what we learned from that one, we'll get 1% better, hopefully more than that. But back to the discussion last week, we talked about some teams that need to win that are good for the sport, and our discussion around cycling and some of the similar stuff where they're just two dominant folks. And it can kind of have this weird situation where when you have both of them in the race, when you have Vingegaard and Pogacar, it's a great race or potentially a great race. When you have one of them, it's terrible. And when you have neither of them, it's great as well. It's this weird paradox. I talked about Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel when it comes to cyclocross as well. It's a similar situation. But in this case, it's quite interesting to think about this at Roland Garros. So Yannick Sinner's out, and it's basically it's been him and Alcaraz the whole time, and so he succumbed to heat. But it caught my eye because he was the second shortest odds of all time at a tennis major. So he was minus 275 to win the French. The only person shorter was 2009 Rafael Nadal, who was minus 400, who ended up losing the fourth round, ironically. So the rest of the 13 all won, except for Federer's semi-final loss in the 2009 Australian Open, where he was minus 200. So the list includes Nadal at minus 255 at the 2018 French, and other than that, they're all at minus 200. So that's how short he was. So shout out to Data Cabas on Instagram for that, at Data Cabas. It's awesome. I also saw that Iga Swiatek lost. So I think the only person who's won, who's currently won something is a major that is still in the draw is Sabalenka on the women's side. Yeah.
And she's doing a lot of talking, which we talked about last week, off the court. And I've been wondering how that kind of stress and load would affect them. So
I was thinking about that a lot in this, even because we talked about, they were discussing this week prize money with things like Wimbledon and the Australian Open and stuff. There's a lot of discussion here. And listen, we're going to get to other discussions later about money. I think it's really important to remember there's a difference between total gross earnings and net income, right? So gross being total takings and net being costs, the profit after costs. That said, there's also a discussion to be had about what people are profiting off of this, right? So you can say, oh, we make no profit, but we all take away millions and millions of dollars. It's like, well, maybe we should talk about pay. There's certainly been some criticism of Sabalenka, or some of her discussion has been received poorly, given she has this massive jewelry sponsorship and is wearing $300,000 worth of jewelry at any given time. So it's quite hard in that respect. And this is part of why I said last week, if you remember, I said they should offer to take less prize winnings as a show of good faith, to say to people, we want the people below us to earn more money. Because saying we want to keep our money, but we want them to earn more, or we want to earn more and we want them to earn more is one thing. But saying we're happy to earn less as long as they earn more, but we want to show a faith from your side, that's a very different bargaining strategy. And I think it's a really powerful point.
But how does the jewelry sponsorship come into that? How is that relevant if that's a pure sponsorship? That has nothing to do with the earnings.
I agree with you. But the fact that she's wearing $300,000 worth of jewelry on the court at any given time, people feel like she's in a position of like, well, you shouldn't be talking about, you should give away some of your money or something like that. I don't think people understand that, she may or may not want to wear that. I don't know if she even wants to. There are people I know who are wearing things they do not want to be wearing. I know somebody who had previously, I was actually texting with somebody the other day. There was previously a runner who had a watch sponsorship who didn't run with a watch, and he used to have to wear them around and talk about it as though he wore it. Right. So this stuff happens. So, don't forget that there is, these people have a limited earning time for some part. So I'm not criticizing her for wearing the jewelry, but I can understand why people might perceive it strangely when you see her wearing, almost $500,000 worth of jewelry at any time. Because like you're playing tennis, that stuff could get broken. So
Yeah.
yeah.
We are going to talk about money later on, and Kirsty Coventry, the president of the IOC, and the comments she made whether athletes should get paid, yay or nay. So save your opinions for that. It's coming up shortly. Lorena Wiebes has been disqualified from the women's Giro d'Italia for her bike weight being 20 grams under the legal limit. Was it last week that we spoke about this, where or was it 2 weeks ago, where the minimum weight is 6.8 kgs for men and women? I said I've cycled before with a manufacturer, the founder of one of the biggest bike brands in the world, where he's done studies to show that the weight limit for women does not have to be 6.8 kgs. It's actually at a disadvantage. Their bikes could very safely be much lighter. Anyway, the rules are the rules. Let's get into this. She's been thrown out of the Giro after winning stage one for her bike being 20 grams under the weight limit.
Yeah, I've seen some weird discourse here. Listen, SD Works Pro Time, I think is the name. They are
Yeah.
suing or trying to sue about this, and rightfully so. That it's a huge shot for them, and they're not happy with what's happened. Basically, they said they wanted the bike reweighed, and the UCI wouldn't reweigh it, and they wanted better conditions. But there's also some discussion about whether she was using a single or a double at the front, I think it is, to change the weight of the bike, because it would obviously chainring would change the weight of it, and that makes sense. So I just don't understand how SD Works doesn't know what the bike weighs with and without a single, and why we're talking about a margin of 20 grams or 30 grams. Like, you should always be, I would always advocate, if I was setting these bikes up, I'd be like, we have to be 30 to 100 grams over in case something happens. You skid and lose some whatever tire rubber and you take some paint off the bike or whatever. Like, I wouldn't want to be 6.8. I want to be like 6.81 or something like this, just for that reason. I understand it makes a difference and everyone's trying to get lighter, but like, you don't want to have this happen, right? You want a margin of safety here.
Yeah, well, if they're talking about lawsuits, maybe they feel like they have a case. Maybe they did weigh the bike before and they feel like they were over, because the discussion is, what did the UCI use to weigh this bike? Was it a spring weight or was it a digital weight? Was it calibrated, etc., etc.? Because their defense is this exact same bike, this exact same setup has been weighed multiple times over the season. Nothing has changed according to them. Now, there are rumors that it has she has been riding a one by, like one chainring in the front, versus in the Spring Classics where she didn't have a one by. I think I saw something to the effect of her agent denying that. So maybe SDWX feels like they do have a case.
Yeah, and listen, you should be able to request a repeat measure of something that's weighing it and see that it's been calibrated. Like, those two things are, I want this reweighed because I don't believe it. I want to see it in front of you, and where's the calibration data? Yeah. Like, I want those two things. Like, those, as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to weigh bikes, like, you need to have that data, right? If we're talking about 20 grams, because it could be within the margin of error, right? If the margin of error is 100 grams, then it could be over by 80 grams.
Yeah, 20 grams, man. I think that's harsh. Throwing out of the race is harsh. She won the opening stage. She was in the pink jersey. She went on the podium to receive it. And then she was told afterwards that she was being thrown out of the race. I think she should have been disqualified to the last position on the stage. Being thrown out of the second biggest race probably in women's cycling now for the best sprinter in the world is very harsh. Like, sponsors pay for these races. There's exposure. The sport is still in a very precarious position. It's not sustainable yet. So big call from the UCI.
The only thing I'd say that is positive about this is that everyone's talking about it, and yes, like no PR is bad PR. So that's the one thing I'd say. No exposure is bad exposure. That said, I agree with you. Stage, not race. It's too much, especially when there's so few race days for the women.
Exactly. We spoke about basketball briefly, the NBA. We are heading into the finals with the Spurs being the favorites against the Knicks, and Victor Wemby being, is he a superstar? Is he going to be like the difference maker?
I don't know if he'll be the difference maker in this, but if the Spurs win, he has to play well, and he will play well. Okay. They call him the alien because he's like an alien. I talked about him a few weeks ago, like how crazy he is. So this is an interesting case, though, because both, but certainly more, the Spurs are quite young. And, Victor Wembanyama is very young. And there's this interesting trade-off here, and we certainly talked about this before with respect to the Football World Cup, which is upcoming as well, about rest versus time zone changes. And in this case, it's rest versus momentum. The Knicks have played something like 4 games in like 24 days, which is super light for basketball. That almost never happens. Whereas the Spurs have just come off 2 Game 7 series, so they've been playing a lot, but they do have momentum versus the Knicks, who've sort of been doing nothing, right? And so the Knicks are much more rested, and it wouldn't surprise me. The Spurs have got home court advantage, so they get 4 games at home. It wouldn't surprise me to see the Knicks steal one early because of the fatigue factor with the Spurs, and or maybe eke past in the end. But I don't know where this will go. It'll be interesting to see. And then also I saw some commentary that historically the best guys on the best teams, so someone like Victor Wembanyama, has been playing more than 40 minutes a night when winning championships, and he's been playing much less than 40 minutes a night, remembering that there's a 48-minute game. So it's quite interesting to see that and think about what that means for how much he's going to have to play, injury risk, and potentially fatigue as well.
It's interesting. This often happens in football/soccer, where English Premier League teams are also playing concurrently in other cups like the Champions League, etc. And then they would play another Premier League team that's had a 2-week break because they're out of all those other cups and they're only in the league per se. And there's a discussion whether it's better to keep playing and you got your eye in the zone and your eye on the ball and you've got momentum, versus you've rested for 2 weeks. You haven't had game time for 2 weeks. So which one will be more beneficial? It's always of discussion, which I find interesting.
Yeah, I think context always matters in that, right? There's something to be gained from both.
Yeah. I want to talk about other stuff, but just before we do, did you mention that Michael Johnson's Grand Slam might be back? I thought this was dead in the water.
So Grand Slam track filed for bankruptcy, Chapter 11 bankruptcy, for those in the States who understand that. I don't really understand what that means. There's different types. I know that much, and I did some reading and then gave up. I was like, I don't really care too much here. But basically, they're going to pay their creditors. They'll pay different people at different amounts. The athletes are getting 70% of the $7 million owed to them. That all the discourse here is that, and apparently Michael Johnson took $500K out at some point. It was pretty controversial. He says it was for expenses. There's controversy here. He's given that back and doesn't want to admit fault, whatever. These people get to work it out amongst themselves, but they intend to have a competition this year. So let's see if that gets off the ground without paying these creditors, which include World Athletics. They wouldn't be able to get sanctioned this year, but they will apparently get sanctioned if they do pay this. So let's see what happens there. It could happen. I've got a feeling they might do like one meet or something like that later in the year as a 2026, because it's kind of the season now. Like, last year's season happened by this stage almost, or was close to finish by now. So I think maybe they do one late in the year, maybe to go head to head somewhere around Athlos time after the Ultimate Championship. And then they'll look to actually build for that for 2027 if they get this off the ground.
And then sticking with athletics in America, we talk about the NCAA from time to time. Has there been movement? Have there been news from there?
Yeah, there's been a lot. So Kenyan Sola Ajayi from Auburn ran 984 at the NCAA regionals for the world lead and the NCAA number 2 all time.
It's a 100-meter race.
Yeah, it is a 100-meter race. So 984, which is very quick. So it's a sign of some things. Like, I think competition brings out the best in people sometimes, or it can do. I also think there's a professionalization of the NCAA. We talked about some of these organizations scouting athletes, but it's effectively a pro competition these days, which is probably to the detriment to some degree of the US, because it may mean there's less opportunities for US athletes, because this guy's actually, he's a Nigerian national champ and African record holder. So, like, it's worth considering who we're developing here. So he won 2026 indoor nationals this year in the 60 for NCAAs. But then there was also Samuel Ogazi from Alabama and Justin Braun from Florida. Both ran 43 seconds in the 400 meters. So Ogazi lowers his Nigerian national record, and he's the NCAA champ from last year, and he was 7th in the Paris Olympic final, which speaks to this sort of professionalism of NCAA. And they become number 3 and number 6 all time in the NCAA in the 400 meters. And then, interestingly, I saw this last one was Sam Blaskowski ran 989 with a 1.5 tailwind for the world number 2 this year, and USA number 1 this year. Remembering that Kenya Solo was actually from Nigeria, and he was in I think Div 3 or like lower division NCAA. So amazingly fast for this time of year as well.
They offer a lot of scholarships to athletes from outside of America. Now, you said competition just raises the level. It brings out the best out of everyone. You reckon Americans benefit from these high-level athletes coming from other countries, studying there and competing there? Do you reckon it raises the level of the locals to some extent?
No, I'm saying the opposite, which is there's less development opportunities for the locals. So there was an argument between Ed Eyestone, the BYU cross country coach, and somebody else. I can't remember who it was from. And again, I'll put it in the show notes because I wrote about it to some degree. But basically, the thought here is: do you have an obligation to have American athletes or not? Should you bring a bunch of Kenyans to win NCAA cross country and then get a bunch of Jamaicans and Nigerians to win track and field, or do you have an obligation to try and get as many Americans as possible? Because if the goal is development of American athletes, you should be prioritizing them. If the goal is to win, then you get the best, right? And to be honest, American culture says get the best, right? That's what it is. But there's certainly some argument here of like, well, what are the opportunities for our young athletes to develop further? Because this is, listen, I pushed rugby players to go take college scholarships because I was like, you're not physically developed enough. You need 4 years as a professional environment, but you're not going to get a professional contract. You're a late developing player, both positionally and physically. Go over to the States, take a 4-year rugby scholarship, go, do what you need to do there, create networks, all that stuff, develop professionally, like physically, and then go look for professional contracts from there.
How did that turn out?
Some parents agreed with me, and some athletes may or may not have gone and done it. They all. I don't want to throw too many stones. There's a lot of I want to be a pro, not understanding that to take a Pro D2, which is the second division in France, professional contract, particularly as a foreigner, can often mean you're there as cannon fodder to just get tackled and get hurt and hold tackle bags. And a lot of them went over and did that, and then came back and went like, "Oh, rugby isn't for me." It's like, well, you got the wrong opportunity at the wrong time. Yes, that wasn't for you. So I think just the thought of being pro, it's one of those things.
Okay, let's move the discussion along. You wanted to talk about Tim Payne this week on this week's episode. I have no idea who that is. Who's Tim Payne?
I'm surprised you haven't seen this, mate. This is huge. So he was, at the time, the least followed footballer going into the World Cup. Plays for New Zealand, the All Whites, which is a New Zealand football team, soccer that is. He now has more followers than the All Blacks. The All Blacks have 2.8 million. And he is north of 4 million.
Wow.
So, and that was in the space of like a week. There's now murals of him and advertising with him, and it's like everybody's jumped on this. This is amazing. So this is there's a football social media creator who found him and said, "Hey, everyone, go follow him, comment on his stuff. We want to blow this guy up." And all of this creator's fans went and did it. So I just think it's really cool to see that this can still happen. It's one of the only really great uses of social media that I think of in recent memory.
That's cool. Well, let's see. New Zealand's in the World Cup. Didn't know that. Well, let's see how they go. Interesting. Did I see that there was a new record set up Everest?
There was. So an American ultra runner, Tyler Andrews, who also was a 2016 Olympic trials marathon qualifier. So obviously very physically gifted in that respect. So he ran from the summit. He ran to the summit from the base camp in 9 hours, 55 minutes using supplemental oxygen and established routes for the record. That is a 23-year-old record held by Lakpu Jelu Sherpa. So there's different categories here.
Is Sherpa in his name, or is he a Sherpa?
Sherpa, I believe both. So
Okay,
I think this is very common. I think it's very common for Sherpas to have Sherpa in their name as well. And I speak from a point of ignorance here, and I haven't done the research. My apologies, but I have seen this quite a bit. So my apologies there. But this is a different record to other records because you can start at different spots, use the established routes or not, or use oxygen or not. So it's a little bit different. So people might be familiar with Kylian Jornet having done something similar. And because I certainly was like, hey, doesn't Kylian hold this? Like, did this guy beat Kylian's record? Not quite. So Kylian did 2 in a week. The first ascent took 26 hours, starting from the Rongbuk Monastery to the summit, which is actually below base camp. Right, so he went from lower down to the top and back. Despite suffering from stomach cramps, he set the monumental fastest known time for this pure unsupported style. So he did that, no ropes or anything, just went up and back, no oxygen, as I understand it. The second ascent in 17 hours, he left from advanced base camp to the summit, which is above base camp, right? And this remains one of the fastest unsupplemented single pushes in high altitude mountaineering history. So that was Kylian there.
Oh, Keely Hodgkinson, I think we've talked about her a bunch of times this year. She's come out with some big goals, and she's eyeing the 800-meter world record at the London Diamond League on July the 18th. Do you know what the world record is in the 800 meters?
Yeah, it's 153.28.
How far is she off that?
She's 154.61. So she's a little bit off. We talked about this previously because she's already come out and talked about this, saying she's doing it in London. And it's one of the most controversial records in we certainly had a listener comment in on Spotify saying something like, "Yeah, I'm not sure that was a woman who did that the first time. I think it was an Eastern European, so maybe a Russian." So I think there's some controversy over it. Like, it is what it is. But so her pursuit of that 800 world record, I think, is reasonable. It's smart. You know, she's doing well. She's number 2 all time. She came out and said she obviously wants to do that, but she also wants to run sub 50 in the 400 meters and sub 4 in the 1500 meters. So
Is
she's
it a good
already,
idea to go to after multiple goals like that?
well, they're all compatible. She wants to do this across her career, because this is kind of like the sub 10, sub 20, and sub 44 or 45 that we do in the 400 meters that we talked about a little while ago with Letsile Tabojo, amongst other people. Kenny Bednarak's another one. But so she's already done a sub 2, right, which is her real goal, right? So she's already done the sub 2 minute 800 meters. Her 400 meter PB is 51:49. So she's not too far off. She's got some work to do it, but it's in reach. And I think she needs to probably improve that 400 meter PB, or at least have better 400 meter ability to run the 800 meter world record, right? So I think those two are compatible. And that's the order I would certainly do it in, because that's her archetype as well. She's much more of a 4.8 sort of speed based 800 meter runner than an endurance based 800 meter runner. She's not an 8:15 type. She's more of a 4.8 type. The 1500 meters, her PB at the moment is 4:29, which seems like it's very far off, but that's from 2018 when she was a 16-year-old.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I
There's
don't.
a lot of meat in the bone there.
Yeah, I think she's probably much closer to 4 minutes at this stage. Now, I think I said publicly last year that she's a good chance of breaking the 4 minute mile. When Faith Kipyegon was going for it, I said they should be using Keely to go for it.
I
I think
remember that.
I think she, long term, if I was Nike, I'd certainly be tapping her about this. It just depends on what she wants to do with the 800 meters. Like, if she wins another Olympic gold, if she breaks that world record, I think then the natural thing for her is probably let's step up and see what we can do in the mile, to see if we can get close to it. Maybe privately in training, particularly. I don't know how old she'll be. She'll be in her early to mid 20s. I think at that stage, you say post Olympic year, let's try some 1500 meter training, see how close we get, or mile training, see how close we get. If we're in the ballpark, we should go for it. If not, we kill it, never make it public, whatever, save face and race your 800 meters, right? So I think that's certainly something I'd do in that year post LA. She's a bit too close to LA at the moment, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she does it and does it easily. Maybe she runs 1500 meters in LA. Who knows? But I don't think that'd be the case. I think she'd want to repeat. She certainly wants this world record. So let's see how she goes there.
I'd love for her to come on here and talk about it. Come onto the podcast, Keely Hodgkinson.
I mean,
we'll have you any day.
I know we're a management agency. I know some people there. I just don't think we're a chance at this stage. We do need people. If you want us to have people like Keely Hodgkinson on, this is another plea. Comment to the podcast, share the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, do all those things, because that helps us grow and that helps us to pitch these people.
We need Tim Payne's hype man to hype us up, blow up. You sent me a video about, what was it, Ninja Warrior being added to the Olympics. What is this about?
This is another one of those good headlines catching folks out who haven't read the article. Not that would ever happen to us, but anyway, so I did some research on this. I actually did some research, my own research, and some reading. So at the moment, there's the modern pentathlon. I don't know if you've ever watched this. It's a bit of a strange, it's kind of cool, but a bit strange. So it has fencing, freestyle swimming, show jumping, laser pistol shooting, formerly real pistols, now lasers, and then cross-country running. It's really exciting because it's really bizarre. It's really eclectic mix of things and whatever else. You only ever watched it in the Olympics. I don't even know if it happens outside of it. I assume it does, but I've never seen it anywhere. In 2023, it was approved to change show jumping to obstacle course racing, which happened after the Paris Olympics, which makes sense. If you want it to be a modern pentathlon, let's modernize it, right? I'm kind of on board with this. The sort of show jumping's a bit, it's now more similar, I agree, but also it's probably more reflective of society at this stage, right? It also makes it much more accessible and cheap. You don't have to have a horse and show jump it, right? Interestingly, though, there's been a new deal struck between the sports governing body, the Union Internationale de Pentathlon Moderne, and the Tokyo Broadcasting System Television, TBS. This means some of the most famous obstacles from the global Ninja Warrior franchise, also known as American Ninja Warrior or whatever it is, maybe even something like the classic Mount Midoriyama tower climb could make their Olympic debut. The agreement boils down to a branding deal, basically. So the UIPM, the Modern Pentathlon Organization, has run obstacle course races in its competitions for years and can now use the Ninja Warrior branding to promote the sport. So this is just, we can now use that branding to say we're using these obstacles. We've been using them a bit for a while. And the issue was actually, the stumbling block was actually in the Olympics. So they've now got that approval. So now we can see some Ninja Warrior type stuff in the obstacle course race as part of the modern pentathlon in the Olympics. It's not that Ninja Warrior is going to be in the Olympics per se.
I was wondering if it was what kind of audience they have, if they have a younger audience in the Olympics welcoming this with open arms, because
Well, they have to be. This is the
yeah,
only way to get younger people involved is, oh, I know Ninja Warrior. I'll watch that
yeah,
versus dress like show jumping. I'm not. What are we doing?
exactly. Asics have a trail chalet that they have set up in Chamonix. I saw photos of this and it looked pretty cool. If I was one of the athletes, I'd be very stoked to be staying there.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Asics made a huge push into trail, right? They got Tom Evans last year. They got Ben Demon, the American. They've got a big push into this. So this is for their athletes with a full performance facility, including support staff, which includes Joseph Mestrele, previous guest. So he's on staff as a data scientist, and he's from our episode from September 2025, engineering a UTMB win. So I texted him to confirm this. This is why we didn't mention this last week, because I was waiting on his confirmation. I think this is good for Asics athletes. You see this a bit, right? So different teams have got different stuff. I see Hoka had one last year, and Adidas have always got the Adidas Chalet. That's been there probably been doing that since 2020, maybe even before. And I know the exact Chalet. Everyone in Chamonix knows which Chalet it is, so they're all there, right? Previous guest Emily Horgan was staying there last year. There's this discussion that happens in the trail community of like, when do you go out? How much time do you do on course and in Chamonix? Right. And so often people want to do the course across, say, 3 days is not a bad training run to do it. But people can often sort of cook themselves because they can go out too late or they go too hard at it. So it's an interesting thought. What I think is good with what Asics is doing and engaging someone like Joseph is it becomes very data driven. It's like, hey, I need you to go do this climb so we can understand pacing, or I need you to do this so we can understand fueling. So if he gets involved and Joseph's super hands on, they can really start to dial things in, like what are your actual fuel needs at this stage, or how do we do this, or what's the pacing here, or what can we expect. So I'm pretty excited for the athletes to get to do this. It's a little bit different to just we got a house, go and train. It's like we kind of have a really specific things for you to do, and that's the conversation I'll be having with the athletes is let's talk about your goals of going out and doing it so we can support you better, right? So that's how I would do this.
Sports becoming so sophisticated at the pointy end when you just see so much more investment going into it. Interesting to see what it looks like in 10 years' time.
Completely
Um,
different.
yeah, I think so. World Athletics have released their World Championship qualification standards. What are we looking at here?
So we talked about this previously, and there's a bit of an uproar, right? So for context, historically, let's call 10 years ago, 5 years ago, run a time. There was an A qualifier. Run this time, you're in. There's a B qualifier. Maybe you get in based on a few things, including whether your country wants to send you, right? And countries could send whoever they wanted in terms of like, hey, you've run the qualifier, but we're not letting you go because we don't want to fund you. So that's the first context here. So what you're really trying to do, what's happened recently was they started to say, no, we only want a certain number of people to qualify based on performance, and then we want a certain number of people to qualify based on points, which are accrued via racing. Right, different races, the more high profile, more points, etc. So what you're really then doing is balancing peak performance with a regular product, i.e. months and months of training to perform versus like a weekly competition, right? Now the latter is obviously more commercially viable for the sport. You get diamond leagues and continental leagues and meets and all this stuff, and you get more money coming to the sport, right? So, but for context here, the new standards are so high that the top 4 finishers from the world champs in the men's 5,000 meters last year would not qualify based on the 1250 standard.
What?
This would also require a South African record in over 10 events to qualify.
Wow.
So they've gotten pretty harsh, and people are losing it a little bit about this. The goal now is 40-60 split. It used to be 50-50. We want 50% qualified via the times or the distances or the heights. Now it's 40-60. So they want 60% of people qualifying based on points, 40% based on performance. And for context, the goal from World Athletics this year was actually abolishing performance standards and just saying it's all points. And the athletes and managers and stuff came out and sort of pushed against that. Now we have contacted somebody to try and come on and talk about this. I'm waiting on an email back, so we decided to push go on this episode anyway because I'm not sure we'll get this person. But anyway, Laurent Muley, who is Femke Bol's coach and the Dutch sprints coach, put out some really astute thoughts, right? And I thought it was pretty balanced. So he said their data analysis suggests that the qualification based on standards is more likely to be 25 to 30%, not 40%. So that's the first thing. He makes a great point that access is becoming the issue because athletes need to qualify via the circuit. So if you've got a better manager or whatever else, you've got more access to races. It's easier for you to get into the to qualify. Similarly, you can actually run slower and be performing worse, but you've got more access. Therefore, you get
Participation.
exactly right. So you do need to be running at a certain thing, but if you run more, you can certainly do better. So he cites advantages the advantages he cites of the standards are that there's clarity and motivation. He says it's clear, run this, get in, or throw this, get in, jump this, get in. Right. It's also motivation because like you can see where you are and where you need to get to. Right. In terms of as a young athlete or a developing athlete, he's obviously talked about the accessibility for athletes, particularly with less advantage. And this certainly disadvantages people from different parts of the world. If you're European, it's a lot easier. There's a lot more meets on that are a lot higher level. He also cited simplicity of understanding. Like, hey, have you jumped the height or have you thrown the distance? Yeah, you have. Okay, you're in. That's so easy for the fans compared to, oh, I got to go do this, but in this meet, this means something, but in that meet, the points loading is different.
Yeah.
Right. And he also talks about the developmental pathway and having a clear development pathway there. He said, and I think it was a pretty fair characterization. The World Athletics viewpoint is that this rewards consistency of performance, right? The point system, which I think is true. It strengthens the circuit, which is very true. There's no question about that. It increases participation, which again, I agree with. And it improves field quality and therefore commercial value, all of which is true, right? And again, if we're talking about money for the sport and therefore prize money and paying athletes for certain things, like then you need to compete. We need to have people there generating interest in media and eyeballs, right? It's
But is
this
that
vicious
for?
cycle.
Does it create it for all athletes? And I'm guessing you're about to talk about that.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if we want a rising tide to lift the ships, people have to be doing to competing, right? So
Yeah.
Athing Mo, who previously raced like twice a year, that doesn't really help the sport aside from when she's racing because like she's high profile, but she doesn't race much. So then like, how do we? She's not doing interviews. She's not doing media because she doesn't have to because she's not pre-race. There's no eyeballs watching her. She doesn't create a sense of interest when she's racing Keely Hodgkinson. We don't get that matchup, right? So you need these things. I get it. It's both and, right? It's not either or. It's both and. But there's a real access issue because you have funding for travel that you need money to. You need access to meets, and then it's also obviously less about performance if it's about trying to get points there. So he closes by saying a balanced system is probably healthier for the sport. Meaningful but achievable standards, rankings as a secondary pathway, enough quota spots for developing nations, which I think is really important. And
That
then
was my
protection,
point. That was my question. Yeah.
yeah, and then protection against buying qualification through travel budgets, which is basically like you can't just have people traveling around to basically buy qualification. He said if standards disappear entirely, many athletes or many fear athletics risks losing one of its most powerful cultural elements, the universal dream that a single great performance can take you to the World Championships or the Olympics, which I think is very true. You just need to do it once and then I'm there, right? Like that thought is very unique in track and field. Like it's very few, and maybe swimming's the other one where it's just like, if I get X, I'm in. Like I just need to do X. I just need to do it once, right? So, yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting. And then we were throwing forward to this earlier. Kirsty Coventry, the president of the IOC, has made some interesting comments with respects to athlete pay. So we don't want to quote out of context. What do we know here? What's been going on? Because I saw some news was out and then she came back with a statement. So what do we know?
So she was interviewed and then clipped for social by a Kiwi publication, a New Zealand publication. So they were probably lying because that's what the Kiwis do. No, jokes. Eddie's all right. More serious than that. But most people have probably seen the social clip. Everyone's clipped it and had their comments. But she basically said the clip was like she doesn't believe in paying athletes, is what she said. Now, she then released a statement, as you said, and I'll read the statement. I'll quote the statement. It says, some of you might have seen a social media post about an interview I gave during my visit to New Zealand where I had a conversation with a journalist about paying prize money to athletes. When I was asked about it on camera, I did not repeat the words prize money. My mistake, lesson learned. Yes, I have always said that I don't believe in paying athletes prize money at the Olympic Games, as this would benefit only a few, very small number of athletes. I do not believe our role as the IOC is to find ways to directly support I do believe our role as the IOC is to find ways to directly support a large number of athletes on their journey to becoming Olympians at the Olympics and as they transition into their life after sport. As a former athlete, I'm absolutely committed to finding more ways to directly support athletes on their journey. So it's been quite interesting to think about this. Like, there's a lot of athletes that have come out. I mean, this was interesting to me to watch these athletes come out. So Liesl Jones is probably the one I clocked. So Liesl Jones is like top 2 or top 3 most successful athletes of all time, Olympians for Australia. She's a swimmer. She's got 3 gold, 5 silvers, and a bronze. And she basically came out and said the glory isn't worth it. Glory doesn't pay bills.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Very good points.
And I think like there's certainly other people who've come out and said this is an issue, but this is to some degree similar to the discussion that's happening at Roland Garros. I think people are unhappy with who's pocketing what, right? It's not about like, I think everyone agrees we need more funding at the bottom level. But I think the biggest gripe people have, if this was still very amateur and no one was really earning much money from it, but then basically what the NCAA was previously, right? Previous to NIL, let's call it 5-6 years ago, where you have all these administrators and colleges and whatever making tons of money, right? All the organizations making money and the individuals at the top of them making money and the athletes being exploited fundamentally. Yeah, I think we all have a problem with that. And this is kind of what's happening here to some degree, because apparently the IOC, according to the IOC, 90% of the money goes back into the sport, but Toyota pulled out as a sponsor after not seeing the IOC prioritizing athletes, reportedly.
Really?
So, yeah. So, and then if you do some digging here, 12 directors, and there are only 12 directors of the IOC, are making upward of 55 million, perhaps closer to 65 million.
Hang on. Are you serious? 12 directors of the IOC.
Yeah, this is what the reports are saying that I'm reading. Again, I haven't done the basic research, but I try to verify this with as many sources as I can. I'm not a journalist. I'm a small J journalist at best, not a real big J journalist. But all reports have them earning millions and millions of dollars in the last Olympic cycle.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Like, I understand the romantic notion that, oh, it's for the glory, it's for the Olympics. Maybe 100 years ago, that's not the world we live in anymore. We live in a commercial society now. I know for a fact, like, the Olympics are so strict when it comes to how you can use the brand, how brands can tap into it. If you're not an official sponsor, they have eye watches everywhere. I think it's called Rule 34, where they have strict adherence to what you can mention. If you sponsor an athlete, and that athlete takes part in the Olympics, but that sponsor is not a sponsor of the Olympics, they are extremely strict in what you can and can't put out. They are they're a commercial entity. So I understand the romantic notion of I want to put money into the development of the sport, so the grassroots levels and the lower levels. But I fear about the checks and balances at those levels. Whereas if you're paying prize money out to the best performing athletes, according to position finishes, we know where that money is going. We can see where that money is going. It's very easy to account for. And the athletes deserve that. They've worked for it.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard because there's also a bit of a like, how much do we give to the top earners who are going to be earning a ton from it, right? Like, do we need to be paying the US basketball team for winning a gold medal? Probably not. Those are some of the richest men in the world. Like, we probably don't need to be paying them. Like,
but should they be penalized for that? Should they be penalized for being good?
No, I don't think so. But I do think if we talk about what's best for the sport and basketball, they would probably agree, actually, just don't give us that $1 million. Like, we don't
it's
need
more
it.
of a hassle to collect it.
I'd rather not pay the tax in France. Like, let's just actually give that to the teams who are struggling to get to the Olympics. We'd rather see these nations who are struggling to play enough tournaments in the lead up. Like, we'd rather see them play, right? We'd rather distribute that, particularly in that context. Now, that's an extreme example and is probably the single biggest outlier we have, where you have some of the richest men in the world who come in to play for basically the love of the game. They pay for their own, they stay outside of the village, they do their own thing, they pay for it all themselves. Like, it's a very different scenario in that context. And certainly the women's team would love that money. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's all, so the WNBA is not the same as the NBA, but there's certain contexts where we got to be a little bit careful about who's winning what, I certainly think. For the most part, though, most Olympic sports, and certainly the ones that, again, when I talk to people about what are the core Olympic sports, a lot of people say things like basketball shouldn't be there, football shouldn't be there, because it's not the pinnacle of the sport. And I'm starting to agree with that, is like, to make these games more sustainable, it's probably better for us to do less of things that are not the pinnacle of the sport and really like regress it back to the things that are really fundamental to how we see the Olympics. So, track and field and swimming are the first two that usually come to mind for people, depending on where you're from. But there's also things like Greco-Roman wrestling and all these weird sports that you otherwise don't see much. I like, those are cool to see there. And then, let's pay winners. Let's try and pay everybody to come there, right? Make it a little bit more sustainable and then try and pay everybody to come on some level. Because we do part of the challenge is some of the best people, or the person who could be the best, may not be able to afford to go. I
Yeah.
know one of the US athletes, I think she was a discus thrower. She was one of the track and field athletes. Flavor Flav had to pay her rent because she was
I
struggling to make
remember
rent
that.
money.
Yes. Yeah. We talked about that. Yeah.
So yeah, there's certainly that. But so back to the like who's earning what. Apparently, Kirsty Coventry's on 350K plus a housing allowance for her part, and like I don't know, that's probably reasonable given she's head of the IOC. I don't think that's too exorbitant, although it depends on where you're from and how you view that. But it's these directors on millions and millions and millions is insane. So there's also certainly I saw some stuff that I didn't want to mention explicitly on air that people were posting because I couldn't corroborate it around what these people were paid per diem. So that's like when they travel, what they were getting per day, plus the sort of levels of hotels they were staying in, the flights, etc. So like that stuff all comes into it as well. And maybe that's part of where this 55 million goes. I don't know, but it's certainly worthwhile considering there as well. But the other question is like, how do we actually pay these athletes, right? And this is kind of what we're talking about. So medal bonus makes some sense, and World Athletics pays the winners, the gold medal winners, 50K, which has been controversial, right? Because Seb Coe came out and did that. And again, we've talked about this before. When a competitive league comes in, right? So Live Golf or something like this, it often makes the PTO T100 in triathlon makes the established ones sit up and go like, oh geez, we have to do something different here, and disrupts them from a pay standpoint. So obviously a mixture of the enhanced games and maybe some other things like Grand Slam track made World Athletics start paying, right? It's probably
Yeah.
more enhanced games. So I think that's kind of good, but it's always interesting to think about this. Cam McAvoy, the world record holder and reigning Olympic champion in the 50-meter freestyle, the Australian, said he called for a $10,000 appearance fee for Olympians and payouts of $100,000 for a gold medal, $60,000 for a silver, and $25,000 for a bronze medal. I think he means some athletes. I don't think he means team sport athletes because that just becomes cost prohibitive. Again, if we change it and we cull the Olympics back to some of the sports we think are crucial in the pinnacle sports, or pinnacle of those sports, then maybe this makes sense. But you can't pay, even if we have handball in there, which I think a lot of people associate with the Olympics, or water polo, or both. Like that becomes cost prohibitive very quickly to give each of those people $10,000. But again, like maybe this money exists if these directors are taking that much. It's hard to know. But Coventry, back to that Rebel Leagues thing and the enhanced games, like Coventry's comments couldn't come at a worse time. Like the enhanced games have just paid a bunch of people a bunch of money. And they've come out and said, if you break the world record, Usain Bolt's world record, we'll pay you a bunch more. Like, and a bunch of athletes have come out and said, I want to do this next year, compete clean and do this. Now,
your money's safe in enhanced games. Your money's safe.
Well, not if Noah Lyles jumps on board.
Oh yeah, of
or
course.
not if Gout jumps up. So to this point, there's been a standoff between World Athletics and World Aquatics and the enhanced games, basically saying if you compete there, even if you're clean, you're not allowed to come back. Yeah. I don't know if that's going to be upheld long term. If that is upheld, of course, their money's safe. They can offer whatever they want. People are probably not going to do it. Although maybe someone else does come out. Maybe Fred Curley does, run really well. But if not, it's a really interesting thing. If people can go across and compete and just take money, similar to Grand Slam track, right? The athletes went across, they're like, I'll still race Diamond League. I'll just do some of this, take my money and be done. Like you can do it, right? Or previously the people doing PTO T100s taking a bunch of money and then going and doing the Ironman World Champs. So we shouldn't begrudge them being able to do that if they can. But it's a bit of a busted system. And it makes me come back to this, like, are we just in peak sport? Is this sustainable? Can we do this? Like, is it all up and to the right? Is it possible? Like, even just running the Olympics and what that does to a city cripples it. So, like, we probably need to evolve how the Olympics are put on to be more like the original thought behind the enhanced games, which was decentralizing it so that it was not in one spot. And given the way that the Olympics is consumed, you could certainly split it up. Now, obviously, the tourism aspect of that becomes different, but so does the cost it becomes more of a country thing rather than a city thing. And this happens already, right? Tahiti had surfing when it was in Paris, and we split, the sevens is across the whole country. So I certainly think it's
going to happen in LA to a certain extent. Yeah.
Oh, LA's even worse. Do you know where the rowing's happening?
Where?
Oklahoma.
Not LA.
No, not even within it's not even one state over.
Yeah.
That's far.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a lot of that happen in the US. And like, again, that may have to happen, and fair enough. Like what's the problem with it? If you
help carry the cost. Yeah.
Yeah. There are very few people who will randomly stumble up on the rowing. They may buy it as part of a bundle and fine, but it just makes it better. I think it makes it more sustainable.
Well, thanks for that. I want to dig deeper. Maybe we come back to it again. I want to look into this 12 directors taking upward of 55 million, perhaps close to 65 million. I just did a quick Google search of it, and that does seem to be the case. I'm flabbergasted by that. Maybe we do a bigger dive into that at some point. Because it's hard to know as well without knowing costs, profit versus revenue. We spoke about in the tennis. It's hard to know
Exactly.
without.
So
Um,
you can't divvy up. You can't have the Olympics going broke by paying too many athletes. I agree with that.
yeah, yeah,
But if we can split, let's say these 12 directors, let's be very charitable. If they're earning 65 million, if we can give them a million each, right? And then we take the rest of that money, we then have 63 million. Can we disperse that amongst the athletes?
yeah. Yeah.
Is
Let's say
that
those
doable?
directors are passionate. If they're doing it for the glory, they'll still show up for work.
Well, wait, yeah. Anyway, we won't
uh,
get into that.
okay, let's move on to the doctor's office. Do we have anyone in the doctor's office? Rafael Nadal, really?
Yeah, well, kind of. He's not injured at the moment, but there was a BBC article I saw through the week, which is based on the documentary. I kind of laugh at where we're at. We're in like again peak content where it's articles are written about TV shows now or podcasts. It certainly happened to me with the Norwegian Method podcast, where there's a triathlon publication that writes about the podcast we do, which is hilarious. They'll break a news story that was just us talking on the podcast. But anyway, basically saying that Rafa had a chronic foot injury, and he basically apparently had like a broken foot. So went on to develop what's called Mueller-Weiss syndrome, which I'd never heard of. It's a misshapen navicular bone, and it's thought to be due to his intense training. So he had to have an insole to manage it. But he also said he had a bunch of painkillers. Had to use a bunch of painkillers, including anti-inflammatories, which ended up with two small perforations in his intestines. Now I don't know um, how much of a language barrier there is there. If it's a true perforation that's significant, that's concerning. I think it's probably more likely an ulcer, but or maybe we're saying the same thing. But apparently in 2022, he won the French Open with a numb foot from anesthetic. Now, if you can compete without the ability to feel your foot, I am just astounded. That must be so hard, particularly in the French where you're trying to slide and you need to use that proprioception to understand where you are and how you're going.
Wow. I wonder if he's keeping fit in retirement. I wonder what he's up to.
He does. Let's put it this way: the photos I saw of him, he looked like he was in good shape. So he doesn't look like he's ballooned out. Now it might be too early, but who knows?
We'll keep an eye on it. We'll keep an eye on it. I have no idea what I'm watching this weekend. What are you watching? I guess I'll be watching cycling, the Women's Giro d'Italia on Team Amani, East African cycling team. I help out with racing in France this weekend to see, how close African cyclists can get to this Eurocentric sport. But I haven't had a chance to look at the calendar. What are you watching?
Well, I don't know if I'll watch anything
Oh,
because we're
what?
away, but Ironman Hamburg is on. That looks like it's got a stacked women's pro field. That'll be really
Okay.
interesting to watch. So that'll be cool. And then there's some Diamond League on Thursday night, to be honest. Rome is this Thursday night. So I'll probably not watch that live. I'll probably watch that on delay. Oh, and the pup's back. Hello, Willow.
People could hear crying in the background, maybe wanting to open my door. Thought I'd pick her up. Hello, Willow girl. Hello, Willow.
They
Okay.
thought that was Wendy, mate.
I think we need to wrap this up. I need to take this puppy for a walk, and it's almost her feeding time.
Sounds good, mate.
Thanks for this episode. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. If you found it useful, share it with a friend. And if you love puppy love, make sure you become a subscriber for more puppy love. Might have to turn this into a social clip. We'll go viral.
People do love the puppy. All right, mate. You take care.
Thanks for putting this together, David. Catch you on the next one.